Hey everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel. This story ain't over. So since it's the beginning of 2022, I thought why not a 2022 TBR video? I have done a version of this video before. I did my top 21 books on my physical TBR for 2021 video last year. And I also did a top 21 books on my wish list TBR last year as well, which was just like books that I wanted to read that I didn't necessarily own, so they were on my wish list. Might do that again, we'll see. But today I'm going to be doing the first video I talked about, which is my top 22 books on my physical TBR. I recently did my bookshelf tour and one of you actually asked if I could tell them the ratio between the books I've read and the books I haven't read, which I thought was really interesting because I definitely have probably not read more of my books than I've read a bunch of my physical books. So today I thought I would point out 22 books on my physical TBR from my shelves that I just have not read yet, but that I want to read this year. Another thing that would be pretty fun about this video is that there are 22 books on this list, which means that if I read 2 books for the next 11 months of this year, I can finish this entire TBR. And I'm kind of tempted to make this into some sort of challenge, but we'll see. I haven't decided. I already have the 5-star predictions going on for the rest of this year, so I might just add this on top. We'll see. But without further ado, let me get into the books, and I will say that a few of these are actually repeats from last year's video, but most of them are actually books that I bought last year that I still haven't gotten to, which is quite interesting. So let's get into them. Okay, so like the first 5 books I think on this list are from last year's, I'm not really sure, but the first one is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I have had these books on my shelf for ages now, I feel like. I don't even remember when I bought these, but I have the first one and the second one, and I've actually started reading this. I was doing a buddy read with Monet from Life as Monet, and I got about 120 pages in and just never ended up continuing with the book, but I do really want to finish it, so I haven't considered it like an official DNF. I am planning to go back to it. It is quite interesting and like a really cool world. It is an adult fantasy set in 18th century Cairo, which is pretty cool, and it involves like jinns and magic and all this really cool stuff and this like legendary city called the City of Brass. And I did find that this was like a little bit slow to start. There were some really interesting bits, but the book is told in like dual perspectives, I think, and I didn't like one of the perspectives as much as the other, and so I found myself getting a little bit bored during those parts, but I do feel like this is just one that I need to like sit down and focus on and read, and I'll actually probably really like it. So yeah, I do plan to finish this one. I just haven't gotten into the mind space to really read it. I will also say that I'm a super mood reader. I will pick up things based on how I'm feeling in the moment. So if I'm not really enjoying a book, it sometimes has to do with my mood. So I try not to like take that into account when judging a book. The next book is another adult fantasy that I've had on my shelves for years. I think I've had it on my shelves since 2019. I think that's when I got it, and that is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. We are going to be reading The City We Became by this author for the February book club pick for the Read and Color book club, so I'm really excited about that. And I didn't include that book on this TBR just because I know I'm already going to read it, so there's no real point in adding it here. But I do really want to get to the Broken Earth trilogy because I've heard so many amazing things about it. I know it's won multiple awards, and yeah, I just want to get into it. I don't know anything about it really, but I'm very, very excited to pick it up. And I will say none of the books on this list are on any other TBR that I've done so far for this year, and they are not like any book club picks so far yet. So I know that I'm not necessarily going to get to them, which is why I want to force myself to get to them so that I actually get through my physical TBR and, you know, aren't constantly like buying new books. You'll notice that these first few ones are all like fantasies that I just haven't gotten around to. So the next one is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Everyone keeps yelling at me for not reading this, for having this and not reading it, especially like a lot of my friends who are like not really super entrenched in the book community, but they've read like this one book and they're like, it's amazing, why haven't you read it? So yeah, I do really want to pick this one up. I know it has like 2 books so far. I know the author hasn't finished the series, like there's supposed to be a 3rd one, I think. It's very much a Game of Thrones situation, so I think that's part of the reason why I haven't started this. But I have heard that like the book on its own is just very good, and I do want to read it. So yeah, I'm hoping to get to this sometime this year. I feel like if I put my mind to it, I could actually read 2 of these books each month this year, but we'll see if I actually do it. Next, we have Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is another like adult fantasy I've heard amazing things about it, and that is about all I know. I kind of bought this on a whim last year when people were talking about it. And actually a lot of my patrons on Patreon have read this and loved it and keep telling me that they're waiting for the sequel and they just love this so much. So I do really want to get to this, and the overall setting seems pretty cool. It is inspired by civilizations of pre-Columbian Americas, which sounds really awesome, and I've heard like the characters are quite amazing in this book as well. So overall excited for it. But again, I feel like I'm going into all these fantasies without knowing too much because I feel like I always enjoy them more that way. So I'm excited for this. Okay, this next one, I don't remember if it was on last year's video, but that is The Midnight Lie by Marie Rutkowski. This book came out I think in 2020, and it is Marie Rutkowski's like newer YA series. She also wrote the Winter's Trilogy like years and years ago. I think it came out when I was in high school or university. I absolutely love that series, and I've been meaning to like read more of her books. As far as I know, this is a YA fantasy, and it also involves, I think, a sapphic relationship, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And I believe it involves some sort of like traveler or thief or something, two main girl characters. And I haven't really heard too many reviews on this one, so I think that's part of the reason why I haven't picked it up. But yeah, I do want to get to it. I know there's a sequel as well. If you have read this one, I would love to hear your thoughts on it and how it compares to the Winter's Trilogy to you, because I just want something similar to that. I feel like I really loved how that was written. And I do think the author has quite gorgeous writing as well. All right, this next one is one that I've been saying I'll read for like the past 4 years and I still haven't read it. And that is Cersei by Madeline Miller. I did make the leap finally in 2021 to read The Song of Achilles. So I feel pretty proud of myself for that. I now own a copy of that. I didn't before. But this, I've actually owned this copy for like 3 or 4 years. It's been on my shelves and I've just never got around to reading this. I kept putting it on so many TBRs in 2020 and 2021, never got around to it. I think I borrowed the audiobook from the library multiple times, never got around to reading it. I think it's just because it's like a bit of a slower read to start. I think I have tried to read like the first couple chapters and then never really got into it and wasn't really like motivated to get into it, but I really do want to read this one. Cersei is basically like a witch and she turns men into pigs in the mythology, in Greek mythology. She's from the Odyssey and she's sort of like one of the monsters or people that Odysseus encounters on his journey home to Ithaca. So it's an interesting concept and I'm curious to see why she is the way she is, or at least the way that the author has imagined why she is the way she is. So yeah, I'm excited for that aspect and I will get to this year. I'm gonna make it happen, guys. All right, this next one is a very recent addition to my physical TBR and it was on my last book haul actually. That book is Jade City by Fonda Lee. This is an adult fantasy series that I've been hearing so many great things about, and all I really know about it is that it's an Asian inspired fantasy. It is set in sort of a metropolis city setting, and from the back it says it is a epic drama reminiscent of the best classic Hong Kong gangster films, but takes place in a fantasy metropolis so gritty and well imagined that you'll forget you're reading a book. I love that entire concept. I love that it's sort of like Hong Kong gangster films. That's just an interesting concept, and I can't wait to see how it sort of plays out on page and, you know, in a book format. I've heard really amazing things about this. I know so many of my friends who really love this one, so I cannot wait to give it a try. I think I'm gonna really like it. I also bought the second book, so hopefully I can just like binge read the first and second right away. All right, this next book is one that I also bought in 2021, and that is Gear Breakers by Zoe Hanamikuta. And this one actually reminds me a lot of Iron Widow by Sharon J. Zhao. This is an Asian-inspired fantasy. It is set in sort of a dystopian-ish world. It involves a sapphic romance between a like thief and a rebel, I think. But basically in this world there are these like mechanized robots used by like the colonizing or like governing empire. And one of the characters is a pilot for one of these mechanized robots. And then the other character is a rebel who knows how to take them down from the inside. And so I think they end up meeting in like prison or something, and then things go from there. It's very much a revolution type story from what I know, and sort of like one of those classic dystopians, but it has like these nice twists to it. And the reason it reminds me of Iron Widow is just because of like the giant mechanized robots that are in this one, and the fact that they have pilots. I've heard pretty nice things about this one, not a lot of things, so I'd love to hear if any of you have read this one and what you thought of it. I've been itching for like a really fun sci-fi recently, so I'm excited to pick this one up. All right, this next one is one that I also bought in 2021, I think, and I've heard so many great things about it, and that is Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto. And I've been meaning to read this one for so long, and I'm hoping to pick it up probably next month, maybe the month after. But this is sort of a romance with like a really interesting concept. Basically, the main character goes on a blind date and accidentally kills him somehow. Don't ask me how. I'm very curious to find out how. But she calls her mom, and then her mom calls her aunties, and they all like gather together to get rid of the body and sort of like save this main character. But what ends up happening is that the body ends up in a cake cooler that they were using for a wedding that they are catering. And the wedding is at like this island resort for this like over-the-top billionaire, and it's a really big deal for their family wedding business, so they're like kind of screwed, so they have to find a way to fix all of this but also like cover up this murder. And I just find this so interesting, and like how this is going to be a lighthearted story with all these sort of like dark things going on. I absolutely love this concept and I cannot wait to read it. It feels like one of those really over-the-top comedy movies that I'm very excited to read in a book format. All right, the next 3 books I'm going to talk about together because they're all by the same author, and that is Sally Rooney. I am hoping to do some sort of Sally Rooney video at one point, but I don't know how I ended up with copies of all 3 of these books. This one was a gift. This one I had bought like ages ago, and then I just decided on a whim to buy Conversations with Friends as well because I was like, why not make a video out of this? So this will happen at some point. I just haven't filmed this video, done this video. I do want to test out if she's worth the hype. I know a lot of people either love her or hate her. I did try to start Normal People, I will say, and one of the things that did bother me was the way that she doesn't put quotation marks around dialogue, and I'm just like, why? It really bothers me, but I'm hoping I can get past it and like read these and see how they are. I know quite a few like booktubers and like other friends that I have who really enjoy her books, so I'm curious to see how it goes. If any of you have read Sally Rooney's books, I would love to hear your thoughts. But these 3 books are Normal People, Conversations with Friends, and then her newest one, Beautiful World, Where Are You? I do really like this cover. I think it's gorgeous. So I feel like I just want to read this because of the cover, but we'll see. Alrighty, this next book is one that I also bought in 2021 after many people just talking about it on like BookTube and like TikTok, and that is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. And this one for the longest time I thought was just about like this really sad life of this dude on the cover, but apparently it's not. It actually follows 4 college classmates in New York who are going through various different things in their lives, including like addiction, success, pride, the search for fame and fortune, etc., etc. And it follows their lives over multiple decades as well. And so you're seeing sort of the rise and fall of all of their various successes. And I'm very curious about this. I know there are some controversial opinions about this one, especially because there are some very crazy triggers in this one. So be careful of that if you're going into it. I've heard it's a very like sad and harrowing experience to read this book, so I'm very curious to see how that would go. I do cry for books, so I'm excited to see if I'll cry for this one. And it was like a National Book Award finalist, so there must be something to it. I'm just like curious to see if this is like worth the hype. I know many of you will probably tell me that it's not, and then many of you will tell me that it is. So I'm just curious to see what I personally think of it. All right, this next book is a YA historical fiction that I've been meaning to read for ages, and that is We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. I think this one came out in 2021, and the second I heard about the concept, I was like, I want to read this. This sounds so cool. Basically, it follows 14 different Japanese American teens following the events of Pearl Harbor, and so these 14 teens are actually put in Japanese internment camps, and so we're following their lives sort of pre Pearl Harbor and afterwards, and I'm just so curious about this history and also just to see this in a fictionalized form. I think it's going to be a really powerful read, and from what I've heard from my friends who have read this one, they absolutely loved it. They thought it was amazing, so I'm very excited to pick this one up. The next book is another YA, and it's a romance, and that is Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon. I bought this book as soon as I knew it was coming out because I really love Nicola Yoon. I particularly loved The Sun Is Also a Star. I don't actually know if I've read any of her other books, but I just love that one so much that I like needed to read her new book. I don't actually know too much about this one, and I feel like the description doesn't say too much, but it involves some dancers and like sort of a mysterious romance, and that's about all I know. I like the way that Nicola Yoon sort of writes her romances, and also the way that The Sun Is Also a Star was written, so I'm curious to see how this one is gonna go. I've heard quite good things about this, but if you have read this one, What did you think of it, especially in comparison to The Sun Is Also a Star? All right, this next one is an adult fantasy that came out in 2021, and so many people have been raving about this and saying amazing things about this. And then recently, I think Mina from Mina Reads read this, and she loved it, and I was like, okay, I trust your opinion when it comes to fantasies. So that book is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. As I said, a bunch of my friends have read this, loved it. It is an Asian-inspired fantasy, and it is a military fantasy as well, and I believe it has a sapphic romance, which I was really excited about when I heard about this. And aside from that, I don't really know too much. I do know some facts from the blurbs on the back. One of them says that it's an exhilarating rise to power that takes you from palace to village to battlefield in a world that is stunningly alive. Another one says, Parker Chan unrolls the painted scroll of her epic tale with the control of a master storyteller, revealing a dazzling new world of fate, war, love, and betrayal. Fantasy will never be the same. I feel like this one's just gonna be really awesome and like epic, and I just cannot wait for the vibes. And I also like that it's a military fantasy because I recently read The Unbroken for the Reading Color Book Club, and we were all talking about how it is a military fantasy, but it's like set in one place, which we weren't really expecting. But this one seems like it involves like some travel and actual like campaigning and stuff, so I'm excited for that aspect as well. All right, the next book is one by an author that I absolutely love, and that is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. So this is the only Silvia Moreno Garcia like physical book that I did not get to in 2021 when I was binging all of her books in the fall. So this is definitely at the top of my TBR to read this year. All I really know about this one is that it is set in 1920s Mexico, and it is based off of like Mexican folklore, and also involves a Mayan death god, which sounds super cool and super interesting. And I honestly just love Silvia Moreno Garcia as an author. I have loved all of her other books that I have read. Like, they were either really enjoyable or like a new ultimate favorite, which is just something I aspire to see in all of my favorite authors. And I also actually recently got a bunch of the ebooks for some of her like novellas and like short story collections, so I'm excited to read those. But this is the last like physical book that I have of hers that I want to read, so I'm excited to see how this goes. And I know this one actually has a pretty dedicated fan base. I know a lot of people whose favorite of her books is actually this one, so I'm curious to see how it's gonna go. All right, the next book is the finale to a trilogy that I've been like dragging my feet on finishing, and that is The Chariot at Dusk by Swati Tirdala. This is the third book in the Tiger at Midnight series. So it's the Tiger at Midnight, and then the Archer at Dawn, and then the Chariot at Dusk. So yeah, this is the third book. I really, really loved the first book. It involves sort of a romance between a soldier and like an assassin from two opposing countries, and it was just really fun and interesting, and I loved like their relationship as well. I didn't really love the second book, which is probably the reason why I'm like dragging my feet on starting this one, but I do want to see how it ends, and I feel like it's gonna have some interesting developments in the last book based on how the second one ended. So yeah, I'm curious to see how it's gonna go, and I feel like it will be a good ending, I'm hoping. All right, the next book is one that came out in 2021, and I had to buy it the second I heard about it, and that is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I actually really, really love John Green's books. I also really love his videos on the Vlog Brothers channel, his and Hank Green's. So when I found out that he was writing like sort of a nonfiction book of like essays on humanity and sort of the world, I was like, yes, give it to me. This sounds exactly like his videos on Vlog Brothers, and I love listening to those and like hearing what he has to say. He also has like a pretty soothing voice, I feel like, so I knew I wanted to listen to this on the audiobook as well. So yeah, I have the audiobook for this and also the physical book, and I'm hoping to just like listen to it and follow along. But yeah, I just never got around to actually picking this up in 2021, so I really want to make sure I do in 2022. All right, we're like 3 books to the end. The next book is Raybearer by Jordan Ifuko. This is a YA fantasy that I've heard so many amazing things about. I think the second book has already come out as well, but yeah, I've just heard so many amazing things about just like this first one in general that I am super excited to pick it up. And it involves royalty and follows a young woman who is sent to compete to become one of the Crown Prince's Council of 11, whatever that means. And the sort of relationship between the Council of 11 is that they are like bonded to the Crown Prince and sort of have like a very like family type bond with them. And our main character has never really known love or any sort of close relationship all her life. So it's something that she really wants. But the problem arises when her mother has sort of like cursed her or like ordered her, commanded her, I don't know what's going on. And she has told the main character that she must kill the Crown Prince, which is a concept I love because it's giving me a lot of like Ella Enchanted vibes for some reason. Like, you know, she falls in love with the prince, but then she has to kill him, and I just love that sort of like tension between what she has to do. And I think it's gonna be a really interesting read. Based on everyone's like reviews of it, I think I'm gonna love it. So I'm hoping to pick this up soon and just devour it. All right, this next book is by an author that I really love, and that is Version Zero by David Yoon. So I've actually only read his book Frankly in Love, which was one of my favorite books of 2020. It's just a really adorable YA coming of age story, a bit of a romance, follows a Korean American teen, and I love that book so much. But this is actually an adult sci-fi novel by the author, and I just love the concept of this, and so I'm really excited to pick this one up and read it. But basically it follows this young man who works for this like social media giant, kind of like Facebook, and when he starts to question what they're doing with the data that they're collecting, he is fired and blackballed from the industry. And so, you know, confused and angry and upset, he sort of joins up with his friend who is also a tech genius and also like secretly his crush, and they decide that they're gonna reboot the internet and sort of like stop this nefarious stuff going on. And in between there, they also join forces with a reclusive tech baron. I don't know what that means, but it seems like one of those like fun sort of heisty sci-fi, you know, tech movies that you have seen, and I feel like it's gonna be really fun. And based on the fact that I really enjoyed Frankly in Love, I feel like this one will have an equally enjoyable factor to it, so I'm curious to see how it goes. If you have read Version Zero, I would love to hear what your thoughts are, because like I just love techie and like sci-fi-y stories, and especially ones that question the stuff that this one is questioning. So yeah, really excited for it. Alrighty, the final book on this list of 22 books that I want to read in 2022 is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. I don't know if I mentioned this one on my video last year, but I think this came out in 2020 or 2021. I bought it the second it came out because I actually really love Christopher Paolini. I loved The Inheritance Cycle. I talk about it in my bookshelf tour if you're curious about it. But yeah, it was like a fantasy series that I loved growing up in like elementary school and high school. So when I found out that he was finally putting out a new book, I was like, yes, I need this. I need to read it. This one is a little bit different. It is a sci-fi and like a very much a hard sci-fi with spaceships and aliens, I think, and just like all of that stuff going on. So it is quite different from his original series, The Inheritance Cycle. So I think that's part of the reason why I haven't picked this up yet, but I do think it might be interesting, and I'm curious to see what I think of it. It is like a massive book though. I think it's like what, 800 pages, which is on par with like the last two books in the Inheritance Cycle. So I've done it before, but I feel like it's just a bit much for a first book. So we'll see how this one goes. I'm very curious to see if I'm gonna enjoy it. If you have read To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, but also The Inheritance Cycle, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this and if it sort of lived up to your expectations. Alrighty, with that said, those are the 22 books on my TBR for 2022. My hope is that if I read 2 books for each month for the rest of this year, I will get through all 22 of these books, which is pretty manageable when you think about it like that. But then there's like always so many other books that I want to read every month, and I feel like I'm never consistent about how many books I read. Sometimes I read like 4 books in a month, and sometimes it's like 6, and sometimes it's like 2 or none. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm hoping I can get through more of these books and actually have a better ratio of the books I've read on my shelves versus the ones that I haven't. I would love to hear from you guys though, which of these books you have read and what you thought of them. Leave me all of your reviews down below so I know which ones to prioritize first and which ones I should be prepared to be disappointed by. And I would also love to hear what your top 22 books you want to read in 2022 are. The ones that are on your physical TBR or just ones that you're planning to like borrow from the library or whatever that you just want to read this year. I would love to hear all of your thoughts, and thank you so much for watching. As always, you can go check out my Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and TikTok in the description down below, and I will see you in my next video. So please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!